This story begins in Florida in 1542 when De Soto started exploring the southeast United States looking for gold. He found instead Choctaw Indians, and he demanded food, canoes, and girls, and when the Choctaws refused to give him girls, he killed 2,000 Indians, and they killed 20 of the Spanish people. There was no more contact with the white man for 170 years. In 1830, a chief named Mushlatubi and two other chiefs transferred to the government the land in Mississippi, parts of Alabama, and parts of Louisiana in the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek to the United States for land in the Indian Territory, in particular in the northeast corner of Oklahoma. The rest of the story begins with a relative of Mushlatubi, Michitubi, my great-grandfather. Michitubi had a son named Zach Carshall, and Michitubi was murdered on the Poto River when Zach was 7 years old. Zach was then reared by the chief of the Choctaw Indian Nation and sent, when he got old enough, to Dartmouth College. He was one of the early people that attended Dartmouth College. I believe it's in Massachusetts, which was built for the education of the American Indians. It was funded by 25,000 pounds sent from Scotland and England, and when they failed to dedicate the school to the education of the Native Americans, England withdrew their contribution to the development of the school. Zach sired a son, O.G. Broome, and O.G. married a beautiful doctor's daughter named Lucille Hardy, and they had two children, Bob and Joe Broome. And the first part of the rest of the story will be about my travels, Bob and my travels, and the last half of the story will be about my wife Betty and myself, our travels. So when my parents had these two children in the middle of the Depression, O.G. worked in Woodyville for a couple of years in the coal mines, and when he left, everybody said it took 2 men to replace him because he was always a real hard worker. But then he pursued a career in the oil business and went to Cayuga, Texas. And I know nothing about that because I was just about 3 years old at that time. Then they found oil near Jal, New Mexico, so he went to Jal, and then they moved to Hobbs, New Mexico, and then in about 1941 they moved to Eunice, New Mexico. There he built a house with for $600. It was just 2 rooms, a kitchen and a bedroom. And in when I was about 4 years old, we moved to Odessa, Texas, and he paid $80 to have the house moved to 511 North Graham in Odessa, Texas. There, I started the kindergarten, but when I got to school in kindergarten, I just walked out the back door, went to a filling station, and walked home, and never went to the kindergarten again. And my mother worried all year long that I wasn't going to like school, but in the first grade, I took to it fine. So I went to the first grade in Odessa, Texas. We moved to Rankin, Texas for a short period, and then we moved to Phoenix, Arizona for the 3rd grade. And in Phoenix, Arizona, I had a great music teacher that she taught us funicula, and about the little boy, the chimney sweep. My face is black, my face is so black. Children are scared and run away when I should like to join them at play. And then in the 4th grade, we moved up to Salt Lake City, Utah, into Go-Go's, which was a place behind, it was on State Street behind the behind a filling station. And Frank Sinatra was singing I'm Gonna Buy a Paper Doll on the hit parade, and Lawrence Welk was singing Oh Give Me Land, Lots of Land. And on the way up there we got snowbound and had to stop at this little motel, and they didn't have any rooms, but there was a sort of a cabin built onto the motel, and he said, well, you can stay there. And there were cracks in the walls and the wind was coming through the cracks, and Haskell was staying there with us, Haskell and Mamie and Lucille and Ogie and Bob and I and Doris, and we Haskell said he was going to bank the fire so that it'd last all night. Well, he put all the wood we had on the fire and banked it so it'd last all night, and it burned up in about an hour, and we sweated for an hour and then froze to death for the rest of the night. And in Salt Lake City, from Salt Lake City, we moved down, and as I recall, we put everything we owned in the car and moved to Long Beach, California. We got there in 1942, and we were staying with Mamie and Haskell in Lincoln Village. And it was at the time that, just a few days after we got there, a Japanese submarine shelled Los Angeles. And after that we had blackouts that ring a bell, and we'd have to turn out all the lights in the house. And so I went to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades there. And after the 8th grade, Ochi went to Saudi Arabia. And when he came back from Saudi Arabia, we thought we were going to be working in Liberal, Kansas, so we moved for a few weeks in Liberal, Kansas, and then wound up moving down to Seagraves, Texas, where we finished the 8th grade. There they complained about the schools in California, so they put Bob back a half a grade instead of, and that put him in class with me. And then we moved to LaPorte, Texas, and LaPorte, Texas is a pretty big school. Bob was first string on the basketball team in the 9th grade, which is very unusual. And I built a lot of paper airplanes. I mean, a lot of model airplanes there. First time when I got it finished, well, a friend of mine flew it for me because I never had flown it before, and it crashed into a million pieces. And then Bob asked me to light a firecracker, and he was going to throw it, so I lit the wrong end of the fuse, and he says I did it on purpose, and so that's the story of my life. And so then we moved up to, my parents were still moving around, so we went to the 10th grade in Hoda, Oklahoma. And there's where at this time I really didn't know Betty well but then the first summer after the okay, so we went to the 10th grade in Hoda, Oklahoma, and after the 10th grade we spent the first summer there. Then I went to the 11th grade there and met Don Smedley, Tom McGill, and after that summer we went to Edwardsville, Illinois. In Edwardsville, Illinois, I remember that we went to see the Desert Song, and O.G. parked the car in a line of cars, but there was no room. They had barrels to keep you from parking in certain places, and so O.G. got out of the car and rolled the barrel out of the way and then parked his car there, and just as we were all getting ready to get out of the car, well, a police car pulled up beside us. And OG jumped out of the car and pulled the car back out, jumped up and rolled the barrel back in there, and we started driving off, and the policeman never did say anything. So we had a good time in Edwardsville, Illinois. We came back and went to the 11th grade, and that's when I met Betty Francis on a hayride, and we've been going together ever since. And the following summer, I worked in Paulsboro, New Jersey. I was an apprentice iron worker, and there we worked on, I was cutting about 1,000 reinforcing rods, and when I got to about 10 left after doing about 1,000, it started raining, and so I kept on because I only had 10 left, and the steward, the union man, came over and said, you know, you're going to go back to school. I said, but we got to work here, and we don't work in the rain. And he proceeded to give me a big chewing out, the biggest chewing out I ever got in my life. So Paulsboro, New Jersey was a wonderful adventure. And then we came back to Harvard, and I forgot to mention that we had gone to college that first year, and so then the first summer after my freshman year in college, I went to after my first year of college, we went up to New Jersey. After my second year of college, I went down to Midland, Texas, and when I came back from college, I married Betty Francis, and we were married on Saturday evening at 7 o'clock, and Betty went to work Monday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning at the University of Oklahoma. And then after my third year of college, I worked in Shiloh, Oklahoma, and Pat Babb lived with Betty during that period, and I worked with what was to be Pat's husband, Lewis, in Shiloh, Oklahoma. After a couple of months, I went down and spent a month at Lackland Air Force Base in preparation for my military training, ROTC training. Then after my third year, and then after that we went to after I graduated, we went to Houma, Louisiana, where we had a child in Norman, Oklahoma, and after that we went to Norman, Oklahoma, and then after that we went to Houma, Louisiana for 4 months, after which I went back to Lackland Air Force Base and in preparation for the military. Here's San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. And then I went back to Bainbridge, Georgia for primary training, and went then for basic training in Greenville, Mississippi, where Mark Broome was born, and then to advanced training in Sherman, Texas, where Brian Broome was born, and then I was stationed in Albuquerque for my duty. After we left Albuquerque, actually I asked for a transfer to Farmington, New Mexico, because we loved Albuquerque so much, but they needed engineers in Houma, so I came back down to Houma, Louisiana, worked in Houma, Louisiana until a roughneck pump and was a field engineer, and then a reservoir engineer, and then transferred to New Orleans as Division Reserve and Economics Engineer. And then when I got to New Orleans, I thought, well, now what do they do in the big city? I said, I have kind of a rule that the people on the bottom were making all the money for the company, and I ended up less anybody ever did. range, and it was an executive vice president. He said, "Joe," says, "I'm glad you're here." I says, "We got people coming in from all over the world for a meeting next month," says, "and I need you to draw me some cartoons." And so that fulfilled my idea that the world is upside down. After that, I've transferred to Engineering Technical Services in Houston, where I've finished my illustrious career as a crew engineer. In 1995, I retired after 40 years with Texaco, and have enjoyed retirement ever since. The end.